Okay, so lovely to see you again as always. I'm going to just so that you know, I think most of you, if you're not already, are members of the Influencer Marketing Secrets Facebook group, and I will share the video in there later today, so you can you know watch it as well later in your own time. Uh, just move. Right, okie dokie. So just a bit about who I am, first and foremost. As I said, I'm a host of Influence the Global podcast. I'm also an author, and I published Influencer Marketing Strategy just in March this year. And that's done very well, which is really a deep dive into the whole influencer marketing space. Formerly, I've worked in the promotional products industry for much of my career as well. And I've worked in the drinks industry, lots and lots of roles in sort of sales and marketing. So I'm also the founder of the influence division of the Branded Content Marketing Association. And I also work with students. We're running a really exciting competition at the moment with Nottingham Trent University. And we've got 450 students involved in this project, which is really exciting. And we've involved 20 brands to try and work with students. So that's really quite exciting. So when that is finished at the end of November, I'll be sharing some of the insights in that as well. I also speak at events, and obviously people can work with me on a one-to-one basis. And when I say one-to-one, I run an influencer marketing program, which is really all about helping thought leaders, brands, individuals become more influential. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to generate more revenue, charge higher prices, ideally get customers coming to them rather than keep trying to find them all of the time, and obviously also want their content consumed by a wider audience. And I do that through a 5-step process. I'm not going to go through all of the details of that because you can read it as fast as I can say it, but suffice to say that it's really about helping and supporting you really get the sort of business that you want. If anybody wants to have a chat with me after, they can book a half an hour call with me and go through that in a little bit more detail so we can understand about your own requirements potentially. So how to attract influencers to work with you. Well, I thought I'd just really run through what influencers can do for you, just to give you an overview of this marketplace, which is absolutely booming. In 2016, the industry was worth about $1.6 billion. It's now close to 15 billion. We trust friends, family, and other people that resonate with us more than we do traditional advertising. In fact, amongst millennials and Gen Z, they trust traditional advertising to the tune of just 1%. They don't want to be sold to. What they want to do is discover brands through word of mouth. So trust is a really important part of that. Influencers, by the very nature of them, often have a lot of expertise, particularly in their niche. And by the way, when I talk about influencers, so often you can think that it's just about social media influencers. Well, actually, that's not the case. There's been a huge rise in what we call B2B influencers, and these may well be speakers. Some of you may indeed consider yourself as an influencer, but you may not necessarily use those words. At the end of the day, it's about if you're in a position of changing the behavior of others in some shape or form, you could easily classify yourself as influencers. Ironically, we all influence people every day of our lives without necessarily knowing it. But really good influencers can offer expertise. Obviously, when you're working with influencers, they have sizable followers. But I think it's important to realize that nowadays it's not just about the number of followers, but it's about the engagement rate more than anything else. I mean, let's just take, for example, somebody that they were fly fishing expert, and they may only have like 1,000 followers because it's almost like super niche. It's not just a fishing expert, it's a fly fishing expert. But you would probably imagine that the people that are following that individual, particularly if the content was really, really good and relevant, that if I was a rod manufacturer, those types of people are super engaging, because they're so relevant to their brand. And just to give you an idea, on Instagram, the average engagement rate is about 1.7%. Um, if the larger influencers tend to have a lower engagement rate sometimes than that, whereas there's been a huge amount of interest in what we call micro influencers and nano influencers, nano being under 10,000 followers. And they're in a position more often than not be able to respond to their followers. Let's be honest, if you had 1,000 comments on one of your posts, you're not going to be in a position to go back and say, thank you, that's great, really liked what you said. But actually, if you've got maybe 50 comments, you're in a far better position than to be able to respond to that level and build real connection and conversations. They also will give you a great share of voice. So for a brand, if you think about it, what if you were working with 50 influencers, those individuals have all got different voices, and that of course will expand your overall brand reach and value. One of the things I love about influencers is that they have a unique way of storytelling, and sometimes the traditional way of advertising is just not feeding through to audiences in the same way that this real raw content. I mean, let's look at TikTok, for example. Some of these, people, particularly over the last 12 months, have seen this channel just develop beyond belief. It's the fastest and biggest growth app in the last 3 years, actually. But one of the reasons that people like it is because it's real. It's not over filtered. It's not overproduced. If you look at video, YouTube in particular, and any form of video, blogs, what you're getting is opportunities for people to see that content time and time again. Whereas if you send somebody an email, largely they've seen it and it's a momentary glance. And if you've not grabbed their attention there and then, it's over. Same as an advert on a billboard or bus media, all that sort of stuff. It's come and gone. Whereas, if you think about blogs, they're continually creating engagement time after time. It's also cost-effective advertising. Obviously, you can work with influencers on a gifted basis without necessarily costing huge amounts of advertising budget. But even if you were, you could be engaging with influencers, as little as £100 per post. What's really good about working with these individuals is their relevance to, and that's what's really important in making sure that you get the right type of influencer that really resonates with your values. The most important thing for an influencer is their audience. And surprised to know that 65% of influencers do not respond to an outreach email or direct message. Now, you may have had experiences of this. And one of the reasons for this, and I'm going to talk about this in a few minutes, is brands really don't know how to reach out to influencers in the right way. But also, at the end of the day, if you've got a beauty brand and you're a tire manufacturer, what's the relevance of that to that beauty influencer? Because actually, if they try and create collaboration and create content that is not relevant for their audience, guess what's going to happen? Their audience are going to reject that badly, and maybe even that they could lose their audience, which obviously they don't want to do. So if we look at the outreach communication, here is the sort of thing that I suggest. I use this thing called jab, jab, punch approach. And what I'm really saying there is that before you've even outreached, start to look at following your target influencer. Like and comment some of their posts, and do that a few times before you create the outreach. So when the outreach is done, it's a warm introduction, and you are very clear about the purpose of this. Um, Making sure that the greeting is relevant to the age and country. Because one of the most important things as well, you want to know that if you're working with these people, that um, that their audience is based in like, for example, this country. And this is why having really good analysis of their stats, which at the end of the day you're only going to get if they give that to you in the form of a media deck, or that you use an influencer marketing platform which will give you some really useful insights. The reason I say that, for example, is let's just say you had a restaurant brand in London, and you really wanted, London-based influencers, and you saw somebody that somebody else recommended, and they've got 500,000 followers. Well, you might find that if you were to use an influencer tool, for example, that 70% of that person's audience is based in America or based outside of the UK, which of course is of no relevance to you at all. You also might find that the follower base age audience is not so relevant for your young, exciting restaurant. So doing your research before you've even outreached is super important. But even if you don't know that, being in a position to say that when you are communicating with them is important. You want to give them something in your pitch about the brand, but not too much, because what you want to do is ideally pique their interest, so that they want to find out more. The chances are they will also go check out your Instagram or indeed your website, and they'll make a decision before they react to you. So those are important, making sure that your Instagram is bang on and consistent and relevant. What you also want to do is try and encourage them to respond to you with a call to action, i.e., I'd love to work with you. Love your content. I think it really fits with the campaign that we're planning at the moment. Please drop us a line back here, or ideally if we could set up a meeting. So be very specific, and give them some hashtags that they may want to check out as well. So what I've done here is to share with you a process of how to engage with influencers. So the first part of this is, as I say, is this light touch, tagging influencers in social media posts that you might be doing as well. What you can do is share their content, for example, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. That will be seen as a very positive move. And indeed, looking at sponsored content that might well be on a paid basis. Then you can start to recognize influencers by creating a list, some of their quotes, looking at in-depth interviews. And all of this is based on a sort of a free basis, really. But these are things that really help an influencer, because remember, this is about collaboration. Now, in the industry, we often use the word collab, and it really does mean that. So it's not always about financial remuneration, but it's about what does the influencer want. They do want recognition. They do want their quotes to be used. I mean, for example, I've just been part of Talkwalker's 2022 social media insights report, of which they've asked I think it's 50 odd leaders from the social media world to add some commentary within their report. Now, they're not stupid. Not only do they get lots of juicy comments from these thought leaders, but of course, what are we all going to do? We're going to share that on our social media. So the amount of people that are downloading the Talkwater report will have been quadrupled because of the fact that they have used influencers. None of us have been paid for this, but we also recognize that being part of something like Talkwalker's report gets our face and commentary into the hands of lots of brands. So yeah, I mean, other things like infographics is another way of working together as well. Then there's the next stage is really activating influencers and working with them, still maybe on a free basis in some instances, but more likely now on a paid basis, so that there are full campaigns in place. There may well be video interviews, panel discussions. I've hosted many panel discussions over the last 2 years or so, and it's been a really great way to bring influencers on board. In fact, I was at the B2B marketing show in 2019, and I interviewed Lauren Pope of unbelievably Only Ways Essex. And I have to say, we had nearly 400 people come to that session, which was the biggest the show had ever seen. So, what happened is a lot of people were coming to listen to what she had to say. And so influencers can be a great way of bringing people to events as much as anything else, and co-creating longer form content as well. And then arguably what you want is almost move towards this sort of ambassador status, which is even greater, which is creating advocacy. So, and we've seen particularly in the fashion world and the health and fitness world, people like Boohoo ambassadors. I mean, if you think about Gymshark, what they've got there is a really, really great advocate program, which is working really well. You can also use influencers in brand research. For example, there was a company agency that flew half a dozen influencers to Brazil to create a new brand proposition. They hosted them in a lovely hotel, and during the period of time that they were there, those influencers were reaching out to their audiences and getting their opinions. What do you think of this? Does this work? Does this type of design work? So it was a real collaborative effort. And of course, by the time the product was launched, not only have you got buy-in from those influencers, but of course you've also got a huge amount of engagement from all the followers, because they've been engaged in that process right the way through. Lastly, I just thought I'd share with you how to negotiate with influencers. Just a few little tips and things here. First and foremost, you need to research the influencer. I've said that already, and make sure that there's an ideal content match. Decide on what sort of compensation method and when. And this might well be, and you'll find it's different prices for different platforms. If you're asking somebody to create a video, for example, on YouTube, and it's a set location, it's going to be a much higher cost than if it was something that was just posted maybe at home. Obviously, consider the reach of the influencers on all the various platforms, and know what type of platform that you really want. You need to consider the level of experience as a content creator and campaign results. So here's something I definitely suggest you do, is ask them for a media deck. And that's effectively like an industry CV. And those, when you start to see some of those come in, you'll be really impressed. But what it will also do is it will give you an insight as to who you want to work with. Look at the frequency of posts, stories, and videos that are likely to be required. If you've, and it is a negotiation, sometimes it's the influencer will say, well, what's your budget? And you may not want to give that away, but equally you might need to give them some idea as to what you want to work with. And it then becomes a negotiation of how many posts they can give you or how many stories. Is the length of the partnership a one-off, or is it likely to be a long-term basis? Also, they may want to know how many other influencers are involved in that as well, and whether or not there's any sort of exclusive content that might well be required. What freebies and perks are you offering? So it might well be that it's not just, is there something that could be given to their audience as well? So it's all very well gifting the influencer, but what you might like to do is to create a competition with the influencers, so that the influencers can give away product to their followers, and that may well make a difference. It's fair to say that exclusivity is a big thing for influencers. So that means access to a product before it's launched, a VIP event that's exclusive to them, anything that makes it, makes them feel special. What they're trying to do as well, it's not always about just them, it's about bringing some really exclusive content to their follower base. It's important to understand about rights issues as well. So are you looking to use some of their content on your social media channels, on your website? If you do, then that has to be agreed. Remember, you don't own the copyright of that, the influencer does. So it's really important that they understand that. Also, there might well be a term. It might well be just up to 1 year. And also looking at the campaign deliverables. Might you want to consider doing an affiliate link in some way, like a 10% discount? I mean, just to give you an indication of how big this is now amongst some sectors, some of these influencers are generating 50 to 60,000 pounds a month. Can you believe? On just affiliate programs. But if they're generating that per month, think what they're selling for the brand. And you've probably seen it's particularly on brands that have been co-partnered with influencers, that they've generated huge revenues for that organization. I mean, I think there was one called In the Fro, but one influencer generated 450,000 pounds of sales in like 2 weeks. So phenomenal. Okay, so I hope that was of interest to you. So let's come offline now and open up the mics, and be interested to see what you had to say. So any questions and what your thoughts were?
Brilliant presentation, Gordon. Thank you very much.
No, great.
A quick question on rights. I had. You've really got my head spinning now, I tell you. I hadn't really thought much about influencer marketing, probably because I'm an old git.
I'm an old git.
Yeah, well, you're probably not as old as me, but I tell you what, you have totally got me thinking about this now. So on rights, and I'm not quite sure whether I should be the influencer or whether I should be going through it, but that's for me to work out. On rights, so yeah, you would have to have a legal, well, on all of these issues, presumably you would have a legal agreement, a contract with.
Absolutely. You should have a contract in place before, because one of the most important things is everybody needs to be clear about the expectations of what's got to happen. So so campaigns only ever go wrong if those things haven't been clearly defined at the beginning. Yeah. So what type of, because there's nothing, can you imagine actually if an influencer has created some various content and then, oh no, that's not what we wanted. We didn't want that. Even things like pronunciation of the brand name. So can you imagine they produced a video and they've said, is it Nike or is it Nike? Little things like this, when they're going to be paid, how long the videos should be, where should they be? There's a lot of the devil is in the detail. But this is like any sort of collaboration with if you think about somebody employing an advertising agency, you'd be in the same boat, wouldn't you? You'd want to know these things up front. Also stuff like brand guidelines. If they're going to make sure that the brand is included, how should it be positioned? All of that. But one of the things that influencers they like to be involved, not just as amplifiers. They want to be involved in early door content creation. So these are people that do this for a living. And I mean, I often think that influencers are the new creative agencies. They're actually now multi-skilled, multi-talented. They build audiences. They create. They're photographers, they're videographers, they're location scouts, they're amplifiers. They know how to. The good ones are on their numbers. They look at that delivery and call to action like you would not believe. It is quite phenomenal. I mean, the other thing you guys can consider sometimes is what we call a social media takeover. And that's actually saying, I can employ an influencer for a campaign within my business, so they could just run the campaign for me, and that's what some of them do as well. But yeah, contract is very important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just to build on that very quickly, I had a situation with a client, with a financial advisor client who was using an influencer. I'm not going to say who it is, but they had more than 500,000 followers. And my contract with the client was to supply creative content to my client. But I was very careful to put in my contract with the client that it was for them and it was not to be onward sold or onward used. And what did they do? They took my content and handed it off to the influencer for that person to raise their profile as an expert on money matters.
Yeah.
So we came very close to lawyers, but they backed down and stopped doing it. But so that use of content, that rights goes both ways, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Depending upon who's creating the content.
Yeah. Oh, it does. It does. It does. And this is why it's a complete nightmare for people that, you know, ignorance, of course, is no defense in law. And there've been so many issues with brands, you know, thinking that they've got access to all of that content and willingly promote it everywhere for the and that's why, for example, you're now seeing influencer content appear on bus shelters. You're seeing them on, but all of that's been agreed because the rights are really important. This part of, that's why agencies, a lot of influencers now have talent agencies managing this, because whilst they're really good at content, so many of them are really not so business savvy, and they miss opportunities, and people have sadly taken advantage of them because of their knowledge.
Brilliant, thank you.
So yeah, Stephen.
Yeah, actually, it's a very, thank you so much for the presentation. Really love the graphics and everything as well. It's really well put together. So thanks for that.
Right.
And the whole thing around influencer marketing, it's something that actually I've been using without possibly knowing for many, many years. So back in the days when I knew Dexter, but when I was back in the UK, I had a practice in the city of London, and we doubled the size of the practice. I was with my father. We opened a sunglass department, and I was very keen to find the best sunglasses in the world and market the best sunglasses in the world. So what I was doing was hunting around, and I found I was introduced to one brand, a brand called Rebo. We got very linked in with it, and because of this and because of my talking, I ended up actually writing articles for What Car magazine. I was writing for getting recommended, and more brands were coming to me and using me as an influencer, and I was just doing it for the promotion of my shop and to increase sales. But, you know, twice a year I was doing a What Car magazine article on test driving sunglasses. What are the best driving sunglasses? And of course, by writing this article for them, it would have my headline, my name, and the address of the practice. And we would have probably 50, 60, 100 sales of the #1 sunglasses to all parts of the country, where people would just, you know, and that wasn't the intention. I was just doing it for fun. But what I was realizing was the benefit of talking about things without actually advertising anything.
Absolutely.
You know, the best way to sell is not to sell.
Absolutely. It's funny you mention sunglasses, because one of the best examples of an influencer marketing campaign is Daniel Wellington. And Daniel Wellington has created a global brand around using influencers. And the reason he's done that is because of user-generated content. And what they've done is they created specific hashtags that were linked to, I think it was like DW photo of the day. So people were just literally using different images of style and everything else, and it was part of this community. And what we've seen in the last 12 months in particular is this desire for people to be to connected to community. And that's why there's been a massive growth in ambassador programs, which is, as I sort of alluded to, in terms of advocacy, this longer term partnership. So then the followers get used to seeing the content and the individual associated with that brand more and more. I mean, what you don't want is what I call, dare I say, an influencer whore. You don't want somebody that's going to be promoting Coke one day, Pepsi the next. You know, what you want is, you want to see a certain amount of organic content that's already there, because that's what's driving the audience and follower growth. You want to make sure that it is it's relevant to your brand.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because just to, if you don't mind, another incident that I used is when I moved to Russia. I mentioned that we launched the first subsidiary of a company called Mondotica. Mondotica had brands like Ted Baker, Anna Sui, Christian Lacroix, and some other brands. And I was the general director of the company. It was my idea to form this partnership and everything. And we were looking at, okay, what's our marketing strategy? Because no one knew these brands in Russia. These were well known in the UK and France and places, but not so well known in Russia. And I came up with this idea, and this was back in 2011, where there wasn't a lot of influencer marketing, and certainly the internet was not so, and social media wasn't so well used. And I went around my friends in Russia, the people that I knew in Russia, who I believed were influencers. And the category that I used was that they had to be using Facebook. They had to have more than 1,000 friends / followers on Facebook. At that time, that was quite a lot of followers. Nowadays, it's nothing, but at that time, that was a lot. And they had to be posting regularly and have regular engagement. In other words, you know, once a day, every couple of days, they had to be regular users. And I invited, there was about 12 friends or associates and friends that I invited, and I did. We hired a hall. As some of you know, my part-time hobby is DJing, so I set up a DJ set and everything. And we got in some Prosecco through a friend of mine who worked for wine companies. We had a whole load of Prosecco there, and we did a fashion shoot. My wife's a photographer, so we set the whole thing up with a studio. We had a dance area and party area on one side, so we got everyone in the mood and in the spirit. And the whole idea is we did all this full photo shoot of them, and they were invited to come along on the basis that they would get 2 or 3 free pairs of sunglasses, a great little party, and the promise that they would post for the following month regular shots of them wherever they were in their sunglasses, just putting up pictures and mentioning Mondotica. The whole thing cost me about $1,000, and the reach that we got, we went from not being known in Russia at all to number 5 in the Russian market within weeks.
Wow.
And it was just you know, and this was totally experimental. It just came off my head that, you know, this would be a good idea to try and see if we can do something like this to establish ourselves. But I always knew that the best way for a brand, whenever I've run retail stores, I've always said, you know, if 2 or 3 people come in and ask for something that I don't have, I will go and investigate it, and I'll probably bring it into the store because there's a demand for it. So using influencers to create a demand for something that maybe people don't know about will actually mean that you'll start getting sales, because people will say, hang on a minute, what is this? And other people will look into it and then buy into it and then start selling your product.
Yeah, and that's a really good idea. I wanted to just bring Damien in because of you work within my old industry, which is the promotional products industry. One of the things that's been a huge growth is gifting, and brands are now realizing that this whole I don't know if any of you have seen unboxing videos before, but this is effectively, it's a great creative way to bring to life a product, a new and exciting product. What you're doing is you're exciting your audiences. And I've seen a massive growth in that. In fact, I was at the Influencer Marketing Show just last Thursday. Yes, we've got our own show. There was a company there called Gifter, I think it was called, that has really realized that this is a massively growing area for individuals and companies and brands to send to key influencers you know, their product offering, knowing that that's going to be shared online. So guys, have you done any packs, unboxing videos or gifting packs for influencers, or is that something that you might be interested in?
We have. So the last I think there's two areas and how we've approached it. So we have done exactly that, where it's around the gifting and the unboxing and unwrapping, and come up with some little taglines and create campaigns essentially around unwrapping and the emotional connection that you get with gifting, and a whole connection generally with it. Whether you are a small business or a massive corporate, it doesn't matter. Everyone enjoys getting a gift. So one of the things that we've done in particular over the last 2 years with how the world has been is how can we capitalize on that, and how can we maximize gifting. So what we've also started doing is a lot more around how do you combine digital and gifting, and we've created redemption solutions in which we have sites that people can essentially go on. A designated set of gifts have been chosen by the client, and then they can then send that to people to then redeem a gift. So a good example of that is with events. Is a massive part of our industry. It's an integral part of what we do. With COVID, we couldn't go to events, so virtual events become a big thing, and we were thinking about how can you still reward or give incentives or gifts to people that attend events. And this is where our redemption solution come in which the client can send a coupon code or redemption code to the attendants of their virtual event. They then go onto the site, fill in the coupon, delivery details, and then they get the gift sent straight to them, and we can do the gifting and fulfillment. So it's massive for us right now, and it's something that our LinkedIn campaigns on Promenade, I'll put the link on our Promenade site as well, in terms of the type of content we're doing, and we're really going into the whole gifting. And I think that's where influencers, or as people said, people of influence that can help with that. One of the challenges with B2B in terms of the size of the clients that we're aiming for is as you mentioned, it's integral that you get the right influencer that can hit that demographic that we're aiming for, because what we do need to be mindful of is that we don't want to be getting an influencer that has like a mass following, but they're doing small orders. That's we're aiming for generally companies of small to medium upwards, really. And that's where influencing for us is something that we've not explored, but it's definitely somewhere where we can tailor the demographic. We're offering more digital solutions. So for us, influencers, social media, generally anything like that. And as you said, a great word that we started using is ambassadors. And what we're trying to do is we're currently creating a site where it is more SMEs for promotional materials. But what we're going to aim is that we're going to create a community within that. And then what we're going to try and do ourselves is, by creating a community on this website, we'll essentially try and find out if we can find ambassadors based on the clients that we deal with. And that's an angle that we'd also like to look at, because who better to be evangelists for your brand than the people that are buying it.
Well,
so
it's funny you should mention that, because I said that nano and micro influencers are one of the biggest growth areas. On top of that, you've got consumer advocates, and the great thing about consumer advocates, they're not used to being. They may have a much smaller audience, but at the end of the day, that's the equivalent of telling your friends and family, you should use this product. And a lot of brands are investing in consumer driven ambassador programs. And of course, what happens then is that you might well find is amongst those consumer advocates is you are finding ambassadors that are subsequently influencers, because if somebody's only got 1,000 followers, but they might have a 30% engagement rate, because they're able to respond to their audiences, they're able to connect with them, they're showing up all of the time, they're part of that community. So community, it sounds like you've got your head screwed on really well there, and I'm really pleased to hear it. Community building is absolutely where this industry is going more and more and more. If you can create communities around your brand, so people are showing up. I mean, even what I do with the Facebook group, the influencer marketing Facebook group, I started only in end of June, and we already have 670 odd members. And every Wednesday I do a round table event. And in a way, what I'm trying to say to people is, create a rhythm within your organization. do something that's regular. Mine happens to be my roundtable, but a lot of people might well decide to do a YouTube upload on a Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And it's every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. So their audience get you, because what you're trying to do, you've got to train your audience into a behavior. There's so much content coming at us all of the time. And what we need to do is try and encourage our audience to react in a way that we want them to react with, by being consistent. The best influencers are consistent with their content, regular as clockwork. So hopefully that's useful. Dexter, go for it. Last 3 minutes.
Okay, Gordon, thank you. It's a fascinating topic, and as with Paul, it's got my head spinning as well. During your presentation, you mentioned an influencer tool. Can you explain that?
So there are influencer marketing platforms. I've covered this area in a previous roundtable event. We'll do it again, but just to give you an example, there's one called Hype Auditor. You should go back and have a look at, I can't remember which video it was, but we had one of the guests of Hype Auditor. And on that platform, you can find out so much about an influencer. I mean, it's obviously you have to pay for it, but what you get from that is a real deep dive. You can find out whether influencers are at their follower base, because remember, what you're after is not necessarily just the influencer, it's their follower base. The average income that the followers are earning, their geolocation, so 60% are based in the States, 40% in the UK, the mix of gender, male, female, the age profile, what else can you find out? The education status. So this type of deep dive data is so critical. So you're in a position now where, it's not just I want to find a bunch of influencers to amplify my product or service. You can actually, by using filters on these platforms, you can really, really niche down to what basically is your perfectly honed influencer. I mean, it's almost like dating. It's like finding the ideal date. It's the same principle. So these tools are existing now, and they're very good. And they can vary on a one-off campaign basis, where it might be a few £100 to a long-term license. And the bigger ones will do contracting as well. They'll do everything, the entire end-to-end solution. Obviously, those are a lot more expensive, but
what was the example you gave, Gordon?
Hype Auditor. Also there's a one called Influence City, both of which, if you guys if you want me to connect you with their audiences, their sales team or the guys there, I'll happily do that. My email is gordon@gordonglenister.com. So just ping me an email, and I'll happily share that with you.
Brilliant.
All right. So
Yeah,
guys, we've come to the end, only because it's 10 o'clock really. So I know you want more. You want more, don't you? You want more, but you can't have any more. If you want to have a chat with me afterwards, half an hour, not now, but anytime, there is you can just reach out to me, and I'll happily book something in, and we can talk more specifically about your own individual. I host these every Wednesday morning, so they're really great and engaging sessions. And thank you this morning for being so engaging and so lovely to share your stories with us as well. So hopefully you've enjoyed that and it's been beneficial. Yeah.
Thanks, Gordon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you very much, Gordon.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
All the
Thank
best.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.